Hello, Wayne Builds Worlds here, and I am talking today about the update that's coming to Civilization VII in about a week from now. It's coming out on May 17th. And I just wanted to cover it briefly in case if you hadn't heard about it, or in case if you had and you just wanted my opinion or another person's opinion or whatever the case is. I'm here in Civ 6. This update is coming out for Civ 7, so it's the sequel to this, so to speak. But I just wanted to show a few things in here first, just to kind of establish why this update is coming out. In case if you've never played a Civilization game, what you do is you select a leader. Let's say we're picking Abraham Lincoln. So if you pick Abraham Lincoln, you start off as the country tied to the leader that you pick. So if I was to pick Alexander the Great, then I'd be a different nation. But let's say Abraham Lincoln, for example. You're gonna be America. You're gonna have some abilities based off of the leader and about the nation that you picked. You might have some special units and some special buildings, so to speak, that you can pick. And what's gonna happen that if you start this game, you're gonna find yourself here starting in 4000 BC with settlers and a warrior. And here you are playing as America in 4000 BC. Vice versa, you could be playing as Rome in 2000 AD if you continue to play through your turns here. Now, what you do in this game is you found a city. In your city, you can build units, you can build buildings, and you just build up your city, and then eventually you're going to send out settlers who are going to establish other cities, and you're going to build more units, and you're going to get a bigger and bigger army. And there are a number of different other leaders that are in the game, and you'll be competing against them in terms of things like military, trying to take over the capitals of the other civilizations, or maybe you're going for a science victory or a cultural victory or things like that. So this is a 4X game, very popular series, and since there's an update to Civ 7, obviously there have been a number of these games. Now, so far, I'd say between Civ 1 and Civ 6, the game has stayed pretty consistent. Obviously, the graphics have gotten better, they've introduced new mechanics, they've changed some things, but some of those core aspects of what Civ is had remained unchanged. And with Civ 7, they changed all that. With Civ 7, which I now have open, they've changed a number of the things that were considered basic things that every Civ game had had. You see, 1 through 6, these things were consistent. And here we are in 7, where they've made some rather large changes. Now, a lot of people were very upset hearing about these changes coming out because they were messing with some of the core pillars of this game. I was one of those people who was not happy with a number of the reports coming out of what this game was going to be like in the months coming up to the launch. And I had actually gotten to the point where I was thinking about not getting this game because it was so different. However, I watched a video, and I don't know who it was, but I watched a video where they kind of explained why Civ 7 is different than 6, and it made me reconsider things and approach it a little bit differently. Now, this is not necessarily the way that they explained it, but the way that I see it is, have you ever watched a movie that was a sequel, or it was a reboot, or based off of a book or a graphic novel that you really liked, and they had a good movie. It was done well. The acting was great. The writing was great. But they didn't capture something from the source material all that well. So the movie suffered. It wasn't as good as it could have been because of how it related to the source material. On its own, it was a good movie. But because of that relationship, it suffered. And I feel Civ 7 is that for a lot of people. I think that if Civ 7 had been released as a separate game, not as a Civilization game, but had a different title, people probably would have embraced it. But since it was a Civilization game, there were certain things people were expecting, and this game changed from those expectations that people had. So what are some of the things that changed? Well, first of all, in a Civ game, you always play as a leader, as I previously explained, and here we have Ben Franklin. Well, Ben Franklin, yes, he's an American, but he doesn't automatically give you America as your nation. You actually select that separately. That's one of the major changes. One of the other changes is the ages. So what they've done is they've split the game into 3 different sections, and things change in between the ages. In the previous games, they might have had some sort of feeling of ages, but it isn't as firm as it is here. You play in antiquity, you play in exploration, you play in modern. And if you pick antiquity, for example, here are antiquity civilizations to pick. You notice America is not here. America is a modern civilization. It hasn't been around that long. So you'd have to pick modern to have America show up as an option. So each one of these ages has different choices for civilizations. And as you play, so let's say we're going to play as Rome, we would have Ben Franklin and Rome, which is a big change from civilization, that your leader and your civilization don't necessarily tie to one another. At the end of antiquity, what's going to happen is that we are going to be allowed to choose a new antiquity civilization. So our civilization will change. We'll no longer be playing as Rome. And the options that we have to pick are going to be based off of our leader. So the leader sometimes unlocks civilizations in different ages. The civilizations that you played in the previous ages will unlock things. And then sometimes you'll actually unlock things by doing certain things. So, for example, if you settle settlements next to a lot of mountains, then you'll be able to play as the Incas. So, this is a big change, and people didn't necessarily like this, that I want to play as Rome through the entire playthrough. They were trying to simulate the fact that the Roman Empire was around and that it broke apart and other countries came out of that, and those countries came and went. So it was giving you a change over time. One of the other things that they were trying to address is that in previous versions of Civilization, that you start off very simply, as I shown, and as you grow, you get more cities, you get more units, and in the late, mid to end game of Civilization, you have a lot of cities and a lot of units to maintain. So one of the things that they did was in each one of these ages, not only are you changing, but they're actually going to have a major catastrophe that comes at the end of each age that kind of brings you back a little bit. You don't start the next age with all your units. You don't start the next age with all the stuff you have. Because as one nation declines and another one rises out of its ashes, it's not always at the height of the previous one. It takes a step back. So, you're in antiquity and you go into the Dark Ages. The Dark Ages, they you lose a lot of stuff. So people also didn't particularly like that. So the game was trying to address issues that were there in the previous games, things that people didn't particularly care for, but they did it in a way where they changed some of the core expectations of the game, and that made people really question it. As I said, I was originally not wanting to get the game, but as I started to give it a chance and learn more about it, I saw the vision that they were going for. And when it came out, I tried it, and I actually did really enjoy it. And I think if people looked at it as a different game, not a Civ game, it probably would have been received much, much better. Unfortunately, as I said, it messed with some of those core pillars. So what they are doing is they are coming out with updates to Civilization. They've been doing this, and they've been taking some of the major complaints, which those major complaints are mostly around the things that they've changed since previous editions, and they are giving us the option of using them or not using them. So as you see here, we have a difficulty, speed, map sizes, map type, and map sizes. But there's this thing here, age, transition, impact. This was something that they added in after launch, that if you pick regroup, this is the original way that Civ VII launched. But they came out with this new option for continuality. And that is a softer end of age transition. It doesn't quite knock you down as much as the original way was. And as you probably noticed, that it was actually defaulted to this new way. However, if you're somebody that really liked the way that it launched, you have the option to now have that as well. So one of the very nice things that the developers are doing is they are implementing these changes, adding in back some of the things that we had in previous Civs, but they're giving the option to have the launch way or the legacy way of playing Civ. And I think that that's great because there are people that really liked the launch version. It did fix a lot of the issues that I had with Civ 6. These changes definitely fixed a lot of those problems. And if they had just gone back to the way Civ 6 was, I probably wouldn't have been that happy because those things that got fixed are going to be broken again. So what is this update that is coming out in a week from now, May 17th? This is an update called Time Tested Civs, and what they are doing is they are giving the option to now play as Rome all the way through. So instead of being forced to switch your civilizations with each age, you're now going to be able to play as the same Civ straight through. Which is going to make a lot of people happy because that's what they wanted to do. The Civ 7 launch way is probably more realistic, that you're not going to have Rome all the way through. You're not going to have America back in the Stone Age. So it was nice that they did those things, but you also have to take into account gameplay and how people like it. And with these types of strategy games, people do definitely feel emotionally attached to some of this stuff, and they like the feeling of starting your civilization and growing your civilization throughout time. And by being forced to go from Rome to the Normans to America and changing that in the three different ages, or from starting as Greece and then you're gonna play as China in the exploration, and then you're gonna end it as Mexico. People, hey, even though gameplay wise that's interesting, that might be jarring to some people. Now, one of the things is that each one of these civilizations is very different from one another. So in the previous games, you played as your Civ and you stayed as your Civ the whole time. As you might remember from the Civ VI page that I showed with America, America had a special airplane and a special building, which were clearly modern-focused abilities, modern focused things. So with America, when you played in Civ 6, you had to kind of wait to the end game to play that. But in Civ 7, because you don't play America until modern, you end up getting, let's use that same example, Rome. You play as Rome, you get bonuses for Rome. And then if you were to play as the Normans, you would get bonuses for the Normans, and then when you played as America, you get bonuses for America. And even as if you played the same country, because China, for example, has an antiquity and exploration and a modern version of China in the game. They're different dynasties, but they're three different versions of China that even if you were to stick with China all the way through, you're going to play in three different ways. You're going to get three different bonuses. You're going to get three different special things. So by having Rome go all the way through, well, Rome's designed to be strong in antiquity. And then in exploration, you're not going to get any of the bonuses to Rome. If you're playing as America, well, you're not going to get anything to the modern age. So what they did is they're allowing you to play now as an option to say, hey, I want to play as Rome all the way through, or I want to start the game as America and play all the way through. But to fill in the gap for the missing bonuses that you would normally get in the ages that your civilization is not designed for, they're going to allow you to pull in some of the bonuses from certain civilizations that influenced or were influenced by your civilization. For example, America, using the same one that we've been using all the way through, was heavily influenced by Rome and Greece, obviously. That both of those nations, civilizations, influenced Europe by a strong way. That eventually influenced Britain, which heavily influenced the original 13 colonies of America, and obviously set up a large influence for America. So in antiquity, from what I understand, is that you'll be able to pick some of those Roman bonuses and have them apply to America. And then through each age, you can kind of pick different things. And then when you get into the age that your civilization was actually for, you'll have your default ones. That's what I understand, at least, is happening. And one of the other things that they're doing is they're making a large change to the victory conditions. So here we are at the beginning of the game, and I picked Ben Franklin as Rome, as you would have to do now, and you'll see this looks different than Civ 6 art-wise and the style of everything. But one of the things that they've done here is that the victory conditions, because you have three different ages, you're working on each one of these victory conditions throughout each one of these ages. So you have culture, military, science, and economic. And for example, with culture, we want to build 7 world wonders. And if we get the 7 built, we have a golden age for culture. If we don't get 2 of them built, then we have a dark age for it. And in between, we have certain markers for that where we can get different rewards. So we start the next age with rewards based off of how well we did in the previous age. So if we ignore world wonders, we'll be missing out on these. But if we get to this, if we build 2 of them, then we'll get these. We'll get a culture point, and we'll get a diplomacy point, which allow us to unlock stuff on a special tree. Up here, we have another point that we can get, and then again up here with golden. With military, it's have 12 towns or cities in your empire, but if you conquer them, they count as 2. There is a settlement limit in Civ VII, another touchy subject for a lot of people. So having 12 towns and cities is very difficult, but if you conquer people, you can get those points twice as quick. Civil science here, we have codexes. You get codexes for doing different things, particularly getting certain knowledge things done on the knowledge tree. And economic, you get 20 different resources. This is from trading. So if you trade a lot of stuff, you can do well on your economic tree. And because of this whole golden age, dark age, we're going to give you bonuses for doing some of it at different points. What you end up doing is you end up trying to do all 4 of these. You may choose one that you want to be your main one. Let's say I wanted to go economic, for example. Well, I'm going to do a lot of trading, but I'm not going to ignore the wonders as well. I'm probably going to say, hey, I'm going to build at least 2 wonders, so that way I can get these bonuses. And then I'm going to make sure that here, I'm going to make sure what this is 6 points, so I'm going to make sure I have at least 6 towns and cities. And then with science, I'm going to get at least 3 codexes. And you kind of do this, kind of balancing things out, and you do this. And then what happens when you move into the next age, all of the things you have to do for these 4 things will change, because now you're in a new age. So economic, for example, instead of doing the trading, you're trying to send people over to the new world, settle on the new world, and then send treasure back from the new world. And that's how you get points here. Military, you get points where being in the new world gives you more points compared to the old world, that sort of thing. And then in the modern times, it gives you completely brand new things to do. It's really neat. However, there's a lot of stuff to juggle here, and it's very easy to get really wrapped up in just trying to get something accomplished, and you're not able to meet some of these things because you're trying to, defend yourself because you unfortunately got stuck in a bunch of wars maybe, and you're not able to trade because there's no one to trade with, and you suffered on science because you don't have as many science buildings, and culture's kind of falling behind because you're pumping everything into military just to do well in those wars, and now you're suffering on these other things. So one of the things that they're doing is they're kind of removing some of these direct connections of things. So instead of saying, in order to get a culture victory, you need to get 7 world wonders, they're going to do a thing where you're going to have a culture score, a military score, a science score, and an economic score, and they're going to give you points for doing different things. So building wonders will give you culture points, but there'll be other things that also give you culture points. So it won't be so tied to having to do these specific things. And that should free people up a little bit to be able to say, you know, I'm doing this sort of thing, and that's going to give me points to this. You know, so these are really good changes, I think, because these are things that people were really upset about, didn't like about with Civ VII. Again, I'm someone who likes this system. I like all the things that they did in Civ VII, but I also understand how some people didn't, and how disappointing it could be. I liked it, and I happened to hit all of the things that they were going for, so I'm kind of a best case scenario. So in my mind I can say, well, there's got to be the opposite of me out there. There's got to be somebody who's sitting there saying, man, every single decision they made this game worse. And I can understand that. I can understand there are people that are in between. I like this one, I didn't like this one. So I'm really glad that they are putting out these updates to make more people enjoy this game and to be able to play it the way they want. And I'm really glad they're giving us the option to enable or disable these updates within like the advanced settings of picking a game, to say, you know what, I want to play as 3 different civilizations, 1 per age, or I want to play as 1 all the way through. They're giving us the choice of doing that, and that is the best thing, because the people that love the classic legacy way of playing Civ will be able to do that. And also at the same time, people who enjoy the changes and have looked at the changes and said, boy, this is a good direction that they went in, we still have the ability to play that way. So, you know, this is again just a summary at a high level, you know, and I'm not going into the tech details of, you know, exactly every detail that's changing. There are a lot of people online who are doing that already. So, you know, you're welcome to go watch their videos to see the ins and outs of every change if you're somebody who really wants to know that. I just wanted to give an overview of why they're doing this, why they're making these changes, why they picked what they did in the first place. Hopefully that helps. Hopefully that gives you a better understanding of why the launch version was the way that it was, and why they're coming out with these patches as well. So I'd really appreciate it, again, if you like, if you subscribe, if you leave comments, you know, that sort of thing. That really does help me out, helps out the channel. And, you know, please leave a comment as well. I've been thinking about maybe doing some Civ games on the channel. And would you like to see me play as in the launch settings? You know, this is the way the game launched, and to disable these new changes, to kind of show you what the game is like and to show why they made some of these changes? Or would you be interested in me, after the 17th, starting a series of the new changes and kind of walking through that? But, you know, either way, leave something below. That would be great. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you later. Thanks. Bye.